This is MRC Uncensored. I have with me today one of MRC's brightest lights, Tim Graham. I love his podcast. I love his work. Nobody knows more about NPR. Nobody knows more about fact checkers than Tim Graham does. So we're going to get into it because fact checking and NPR both are in the news. And I want to begin, Tim, acknowledging the great work you've done on these issues and how you're actually making an impact, changing the direction of media, the media landscape, and the way our country is getting news and information.
Well, you don't always see a lot of change when you watch the content of these things, but you definitely, I think we always can say that we have an impact on public opinion, on how the media performs. You know, it all reminds me of, I think it was the 2004 convention, and Tom Brokaw was speaking, a Republican convention, I think. It might have either one of the party conventions, and they had a media panel, and Tom Brokaw was there, and he was like, Brent Bozell's trying to drive up our negatives. And it's like, yes, that is true.
Okay, well, you've been driving up the negatives on PolitiFact. What is, just in like in a sentence, what is this PolitiFact entity?
It was founded in 2007 out of the Tampa Bay Times. The Pointer, which owns the Tampa Bay Times, has the Pointer Institute. That's Pointer with a Y. This
is the Soros-funded Pointer Institute.
Yes, and other prominent leftists like Craig Newmark from Craigslist. Mm-hmm. And obviously some of the social media platforms like Facebook give them big money or have given them big money. So they are supposed to be what they call themselves as an independent fact checker, and one of the reasons we research them is to try to underline that independent is not a word you should use.
Yeah. You know, when I watch YouTube videos, I'm always impressed when the host says, and you can click here, and a link magically appears, or click here. So our own editor, please click here to see and listen to the podcast that you did that goes through the objective data on how PolitiFact is so radicalized, and pushes so hard for a political party. Maybe you can give us a couple bullet points about that, but then I want to get into some fun stuff, the subjective stuff, not just the numbers, but like PolitiFact. What do they do? How are they pushing people to a left-wing narrative?
Well, the big numbers from what the study we just did was 3 months of PolitiFact, January through March, and named officials. Because what I discovered was the first 3 weeks of January, there were 20 checks of Republicans and just one of a Democrat, which was President Biden.
20?
20 to 1. Uh-huh. So I said, I think this is going to be worth watching. Now, I tweeted it was 20 to 1, and then suddenly they had 5 new Democrat fact checks.
Yeah,
was it me? But yes, they suddenly got religion there for a second. But
not really, because it seems to me when I've reading your piece that when they do fact check the left, it's to amplify the left's message. Like, yay, they were telling the truth. There's no border crisis.
Well, that in particular, yes. I mean, I think that there is. So the big number was of Republicans. There were 63 fact checks, and there were almost 75% on what we call the false side. Mostly false, or pants on fire. I don't really do the half-true very much because it seems sort of modeled like, Then on the mostly true or true side, I think there was only 8 out of like 63. And then with the Democrats, it was kind of the opposite. The Democrats were 39 fact checks, 10 of them mostly false, or, well, there wasn't a pants on fire.
Yeah.
So it's 25.6%. So there's just a really dramatic difference between the way they approach the parties.
Okay, well, we're going to have some fun here. We are in real time going to check PolitiFact. This is not scripted. We are doing this to find out true organic results. We're not gaming it. But I want to start off with the fibber in chief. There are some notorious lies, untruthful statements from the President of the United States. I don't want to go through these particular things because many of these are ancient history. Of course, he lied saying that He finished at the top of his law school graduating class when he actually finished in the bottom
10 or
11%. He was the bottom 11 percentile. That he had multiple scholarships, multiple degrees. He claimed to have gone to a historically black college at one point. He claimed that he taught at the University of Pennsylvania for 4 years.
Full time. He said he was a full professor.
A full professor. He's claimed to be kind of Greek and semi-Jewish.
Puerto
Rican, a coal miner, a truck driver. Yeah, Donald Trump exaggerates. Speaking at CPAC, he would claim that the line, to try to get into his speech was, 20 blocks long. And, yes, there was a line waiting to get in. It wasn't 20 blocks, but it's sort of your typical exaggeration, whereas Joe Biden is just outright lies. Let me ask you, you've got your trusty computer here. Joe Biden and his DHS Secretary, Mayorkas, have both claimed for 3 years that there's not a border crisis. So can you check, what does PolitiFact say about Joe Biden and claims about the border? Either Joe Biden or Alejandro Mayorkas.
Biden, we'll do Biden border. Yeah, they have they have a search engine on the website. So somehow this brings up 4,300 fact checks. I don't think that's quite right. But if you look at the first page of this, like you always know the first page of Google is going to be what most people will see. What you have here is a list of Republican and conservative false. Adam Laxalt, who ran for the Senate in Nevada.
Former Attorney General of Nevada, ran for the U.S. Senate.
Statement, Biden and Democrats have dismantled border security. False.
When we actually know that Biden eliminated almost every single one of Trump's executive orders to protect the border.
Other than Title 42, a lot of those he did away with right away. Donald Trump, this was 2020, says Joe Biden's even talking about taking the wall down. False. That might be false. Donald Trump on March 21, 2021. We proudly handed the Biden administration the most secure border in history. All they had to do was keep this smooth-running system on autopilot. Mostly false.
Well, what we actually know is that during the Biden, or rather the Trump administration, illegal border crossings were down 87%. And with the Biden administration removing all of those executive orders, as well as the policy with Mexico, that illegal border crossings, of course, have skyrocketed, including hundreds and hundreds of people on the terror watch list. Yet, PolitiFact can't seem to get its facts straight.
This, like in many other occasions, seems designed to play defense. Look, the liberal reporter and the liberal fact checker are largely the same thing. A fact check is basically reporting or compiling a research paper of sorts. And they both, to me, seem to have the same goal, which is here's why the Republicans are wrong about something. Or here's how Biden, we can justify what he said.
Well, let's go back to the objective data you created. I think, I was pretty stunned, even though I'm here at the Media Research Center and I know the liberal bias that exists. I was still stunned to see the number of times that say Trump was fact-checked versus Biden. What are those numbers?
Well, you have to remember Joe Biden's been a politician during the entire time span of PolitiFact, so that goes back to 2007. Obviously, he's vice president for 8 years. He's been president now for 3 years. And I think we're still in the 300s with Biden. Trump, I believe, is the most fact-checked individual on this website, and it's now over 1,000. And where it gets really funny is when you count just the pants on fire blogs. Trump has, as of April, 187 pants on fire blogs. Biden, again, who was in office this entire time, has 7.
Okay, so give me a couple of the Trump pants on fire PolitiFact checks here. I want to see the nature. What are they challenging him on versus what they're challenging Biden on? Again, this is not scripted. It's not planned. We're going to see what the results are. My hypothesis is that they're they're fact-checking Trump on like how long the line was to get into one of his events versus Biden, which is just an outright lie on a substantive matter.
I believe that Biden, I think, has one pants on fire as president. And of course, Donald Trump has, I believe, 5 pants on fire so far this year. So, I mean, Biden almost has the same number of pants on fire blogs in his entire career as Trump gets in about a week, a quarter. So there's this one from February 9. Trump says, I cooperated far more than Joe Biden in the classified documents investigations. That's kind of a classic Trump thing.
Yes.
So see, a lot of times you could say it's false. Pants on fire is their way of saying you're a ridiculous oaf. This is one of those cases where they're just so engaged in Joe Biden's so much more cooperative. And especially we know that, yes, the whole White House line was Biden can't really be guilty because he cooperated and gave the documents. Now, remember, he took the documents when he was like a senator, some of them, when he wasn't supposed to, and kept them for decades. But, well, when you found out I had him, I gave him right back. And it's like, oh, see, he cooperated much better. It's very lawyerly. Oh,
It's essentially that PolitiFact is using its tools to cover to cover up the Biden indiscretion.
Yeah, I mean, everything is spin. Yes, one of the jokes is we call them PolitiFlack. Yes, here's January 30 is the date of the fact check. Democrats, quote, used COVID to cheat, unquote, in the 2020 election.
This is a Donald Trump fact check.
Yeah, pants on fire. The Democrats used COVID to cheat. See, now there's so much room here to say. We all know that the Democrats used COVID to dramatically exaggerate or remove all the limitations on mail-in voting.
Many governors and secretaries of state illegally distributed unsolicited mail-in ballots. Pennsylvania, their own Supreme Court determined that what happened was unconstitutional. Yeah, illegal conduct on across several states. That is not in dispute today.
I think what the emotion they're feeling here is Trump is saying the election was stolen from me. And they take what you could narrowly say, well, actually, they used COVID to do this, 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 and this. And they're like, no. Pants on fire because it seems to deny the election results. But their use of the pants on fire here tells you what the message they're really trying to send. And that's where we would say something like, when Joe Biden says, this bridge that collapsed in Baltimore, I've gone over many times in a car and on a train. And there are no train tracks on this bridge. Now, couldn't we say that's a pants on fire lie? Now, on some level, I think what they're trying to do here is assign a prize for evil intent. So if Biden says something silly, which might suggest infirmity, well, it can't be pants on fire. He didn't lie on purpose. He just, Grandpa Joe, he says these things that are amusing, And so when Biden does this, PolitiFact writes an article on it, but won't put a truthometer rating on it. Because they know his information there was false. But it had that whole, the White House clarified that's not what he meant to say.
Okay, so one thing that Biden has lied about often is that Donald Trump wants a nationwide ban on all abortions. Okay, so that's not right lie. What does PolitiFact say? Has PolitiFact ever checked Biden's lie on this?
I tried Biden abortion ban, and the first result was Mike Pence false. Says Joe Biden and Kamala Harris support abortion, quote, up to the moment of birth. I cannot tell you how many checks they've done of this nature, going back to Ralph Northam and the whole 9 yards. Because Donald Trump loves to talk about how they're basically for aborting the child after birth if that's the mother's choice. Yeah. I always refer them to the 2020 Democrat Party platform, which says we oppose all restrictions on abortion. Well, what?
Look, you can look at the legislation that Democrats have voted on consistently, which allow abortion all the way through birth. This is what this is the legislation Democrats have voted for, and PolitiFact will say it's a lie.
Correct, and that the Freedom of Choice Act went far beyond what Roe versus Wade supposedly was, which was on a trimester system, and it allowed some sort of wiggle room to not allow abortions in the 9th month or whatever. And the Freedom of Choice Act that they proposed would remove every state restriction from coast to coast. Mm-hmm. This was, yes, they're not going to promote that as an extreme.
Okay, but both Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have claimed that Donald Trump and Republicans want a nationwide ban on all abortions. They've said this repeatedly. Does PolitiFact rate any of those lies? I'm
not finding it. I don't think that would be the case.
You'd think that since the Democrats, this is their #1 campaign theme and talking point, a fact checker, an honest and legitimate fact checker, would evaluate the veracity of this claim.
What they do instead is Kamala Harris stated January 22, 2024, today in America, 1 in 3 women of reproductive age live in a state with an abortion ban. True. See, this is the way that you choose what you want to confirm.
So PolitiFact is amplifying the Biden-Harris #1 campaign theme. They're essentially, they ought to register with the Federal Election Commission as an independent expenditure ad.
Well, as does much of the media. There's a piece, I believe, on Fox today that makes the point that the Biden people actually pressured Snopes to change its rating from mixture to mostly false. And so we can't rule out that some of these ratings aren't something that the Biden people could send emails to PolitiFact saying, do this one.
Okay, so here's another test. And I love the fact that you don't know what I'm going to ask and I don't know the answers. On inflation. The inflation rate under Trump was much lower, multiple times lower than it is under Biden. What does PolitiFact say about any politician talking about inflation?
1,333 fact checks. Top of the page, Joe Biden, mostly true. U.S. inflation is, quote, now down close to 3%, the lowest among the world's leading economies, unquote. See, mostly true for a Biden spin.
Do you see this theme, this tendency, this trend? Every time Joe Biden either has an affirmative campaign theme or a defense for his weaknesses, PolitiFact is amplifying the message. It's the bullhorn for the Biden-Harris campaign.
And yet, Mitt Romney on January 16, 2022 on Meet the Press, people are 7% poorer now because of Biden inflation, mostly false.
How is that mostly false? What does PolitiFact say?
Now they do this if your time is short thing here, if you're too dumb and you only want to read one paragraph. The inflation rate was 7% over the past year. However, a 4.7% increase in wages has reduced the impact on the typical worker by about 2/3, making Romney's figure exaggerated. Now, the wage increase is something, but what you're basically saying there is inflation is outpacing wage growth.
People are worse off under the Biden
But they're
economy.
like, let's get Mitt Romney. Which piece of what Mitt Romney says on Meet the Press do they pluck out?
I don't think they're so much trying to get Mitt Romney. They're trying to defend Joe Biden.
Yeah, and so this is the sort of thing where it just feels like spin. It feels like, I think you get the overarching impression, Republicans lie and Democrats tell the truth.
Well, whether we're talking about PolitiFact or NPR or any of these other radical left-wing politicized outlets that exist today claiming to purport to share news when actually they're Democrat talking points. You can learn more from Tim Graham and his writing and the NewsBusters podcast that he hosts. I really encourage you to stay informed of these things. And truly, I mean, long before I got here to the Media Research Center, Tim Graham was my source for this kind of bias. Thank you for joining us.
I want to invite you as my guest on a very special, once-in-a-lifetime, 7-day post-election cruise in the Caribbean. It's going to be a blast.